Wait, what if scientists could bring back a mammoth? Not a dinosaur with laser eyes, not a dragon, an actual shaggy, giant Ice Age mammoth. That sounds impossible, a little crazy, and honestly, a tiny bit hilarious. Would a mammoth fit in a zoo, in a lab, in an elevator? Today, some scientists are seriously studying whether extinct animals, or at least something very close to them, could return. And the woolly mammoth is one of the most famous examples. But how would that even work? Do scientists just find a frozen mammoth, press a giant green button, and yell, "Wake up, fuzzy elephant"? Nope. The real science is much smarter and much weirder. First, let's understand the problem. A mammoth is extinct. That means there are no living mammoths walking around today. Extinction is the end of a species. So when people say, bring back a mammoth, they do not mean opening a secret mammoth closet and letting one out. They mean trying to recreate an animal that is biologically very close to the mammoth. In science, this idea is often called de-extinction. That does not always mean a perfect copy. Sometimes it means making a very close relative with important traits from the extinct animal. So the big question is not just, can we find one? It is, can we rebuild something like it using modern biology? Now we need the star of the story, DNA. DNA is like the instruction book for building a living thing. It helps shape what an animal looks like and how its body works. Fur, body size, fat, cold resistance, and many other traits are connected to genes inside DNA. Scientists do not build a mammoth by gluing fur onto an elephant. They study the genetic instructions. If they can find important mammoth DNA information and compare it with elephant DNA, they can learn which parts made mammoths mammoths. Think of it like editing a recipe. If elephants are the basic recipe, mammoth genes might be special ingredients for cold, fur, and ice age survival. So why do we hear more about mammoths than dinosaurs? Because mammoths are much more recent, and that matters a lot. DNA breaks down over time. Dinosaurs lived far, far too long ago. Their DNA is not waiting around in perfect shape for scientists. Mammoths, on the other hand, lived much later, and some remains have been found in cold places like Siberian permafrost. Cold conditions can help preserve tissue and bits of DNA better than hot, messy environments. That still does not make the job easy. It is extremely difficult. But compared with dinosaurs, mammoths are much more realistic. So if science wants to aim for a famous extinct animal, the fuzzy Ice Age giant is a better target. Scientists cannot just guess what a mammoth was like. They study mammoth remains, ancient DNA, bones, teeth, preserved tissues, and the animal's closest living relatives. And who are those relatives? Elephants, especially Asian elephants, which are closely related to mammoths. That relationship is a huge clue. If mammoths and elephants are biological cousins, scientists can compare their genomes and look for important differences. Which genes helped mammoths grow thick fur? Which genes helped them survive the cold? Which genes changed body fat, ears, and blood-related traits? The more scientists compare, the more they can identify the features that made mammoths special. This is where things get really interesting. Scientists may try to use gene editing. Instead of creating a mammoth from nothing, they can start with elephant cells and edit certain genes to make them more mammoth-like. For example, they might focus on traits linked to fur, cold tolerance, fat storage, and other Ice Age adaptations. Then those edited cells could be used to create an embryo. In theory, that embryo might develop into an animal with many mammoth-like features. That is not the same as simply finding an old egg in the freezer. It is careful, complicated genetic engineering. In other words, science is not pressing a magic button. It is doing very tiny, very smart biological editing. Here is a very important detail. A future mammoth-like animal might not be a perfect original mammoth. It might be something more like a genetically edited elephant with key mammoth traits. That still matters a lot, but it is not exactly the same as traveling back in time and grabbing a baby mammoth. Scientists also have to think about development, health, pregnancy, and whether the animal could live well. There are huge technical and ethical challenges, so when headlines say, mammoths are coming back, the truth is more careful. A better way to say it might be, scientists are trying to build an animal that is very close to a mammoth by using elephant biology and mammoth genetic clues. Now you might ask, why would anyone even want to do this? One reason is science. De-extinction research can teach us a lot about genetics, extinction, and how species adapt to harsh environments. Another reason is conservation. Some tools used to study mammoth-like traits could also help protect living animals. And some scientists are interested in ecology. There is an idea that large grazing animals in cold regions might help reshape grasslands and influence the environment in interesting ways. But this part is debated, and scientists do not all agree on what would happen. So, the Mammoth Project is not just about making a cool, fluffy animal. It is also about biology, ecosystems, and the future of conservation. Of course, this story is not just excitement and fluffy dreams. There are hard questions. Would a mammoth-like animal be healthy? Where would it live? Would it be fair to create such an animal if we cannot care for it properly? Could money spent on de-extinction be used to protect animals that are alive right now? Scientists, ethicists, and conservation experts argue about these issues, and they should. Good science asks not only, can we do this, but also, should we do this? So bringing back a mammoth is not just a science puzzle, it is also a moral puzzle. And that means the story is bigger than a giant furry animal walking around looking adorable and confused. So, can scientists bring back mammoths? The honest answer is, not exactly in a simple movie way, but they may be able to create something very close. Scientists are not reviving a perfect ancient mammoth with one dramatic switch. They are studying DNA, comparing mammoths with elephants, editing genes, and exploring whether a mammoth-like animal could exist again. It is hard, controversial, exciting, and still developing. So the answer is not a simple yes or no. It is more like, science is getting surprisingly close to the idea, and whether that becomes reality will depend on biology, technology, ethics, and a lot of careful work. Which means the future might not have dinosaur parks, but it just might get a very fuzzy surprise.